Welcome to the Digital Responsibility Podcast. There is a vibrant community around the world exploring how we drive forward digital innovation, products and services, and generally exploit technology progression for the sustained benefit of society and the planet. On this podcast, you will hear from me, Christopher Johnson, and Rob Price, two of the original founders of Corporate Digital Responsibility, as we speak to our guests to hear their stories and piece together what it means to be responsible in the digital age. If you'd like to learn more, take a look at the website, corporatedigitalresponsibility.net.
So welcome everybody to episode 9 of the 5th season of Digital Responsibility Podcast. And we've had a bit of a break over the last 6 months. So it's been a while since the last episode. One of the great conversations earlier in the series was talking about the start of the CDR Europe project across 7 countries or 7 regions across Europe. And we're going to revisit that. I know that in terms of some of the recent social media, there's been more interest in that Interreg funded project. And I'm delighted to be joined today by 2 guests, both based out in Paris, in France. So could I hand it across to you both, Christine and Nicolas, to introduce yourselves and a bit of context about what you're doing and hoping to talk about tonight?
Yes, so I'm Nicolas Cardi. I'm European project manager at Cap Digital, and basically I'm in charge of managing the CDR Europe project for Cap Digital. We consider this topic of the digital responsibility as very strategic in our cluster. It's one of the strategic pillars of development of Cap Digital. And we have also, not only we participate to this interesting project with other European partners, but we have also created a special delegation on digital responsibility, on which also Christine participates. There goes more than 200 entities, which are companies, big groups, SMEs, research centers, and so on. So this topic is very important for us. Just concerning Cap Digital, we are the main digital and sustainability cluster in France with around 900 members, and probably we are the biggest in Europe as well. And nothing, we are very very focused on the topic. This is why we are collaborating with the partners on this CDR project, and we're glad to be here tonight with you.
Thank you, Nicolas. So my name is Christine Balaguet. I am a professor of universities in France, and I'm working at Institut Mines Telecom, which is called the number 1 of engineers and management school in France. We gather 8 big engineers and management school. I'm a researcher principally, and I have managed different network of research, and I founded a few years ago a network called Good in Tech, and it is based on a partnership between Institut Mines Telecom and Sciences Po in France. So it's a pluridisciplinary research, and we address 2 main issues. The first one is data, artificial intelligence, and society, in which we address the issues of responsible AI, disinformation, and moderation, and regulation of platform. And the second big topic is CDR, corporate digital responsibility. So I'm, of course, very interested in this topic. We have made a lot of research within this network of research, and we are interested about the concept. What does this concept represent? What are the dimensions? How we can model corporate digital responsibility? And we are also interested in how to implement it. And I think we will discuss this topic tonight, because the question is, okay, even if we don't have consensus in the literature about the CDR, the main problem, in my point of view, is how to implement it, and what are the problems, what are the challenges in the implementation. So we work a lot in Good in Tech in practices, and in practices in some areas, for instance, human resources team, marketing and publicity. So everywhere where we have algorithms, technology, data, and usage. And we address this issue of CDR in this job. And in parallel, I'm also member historically of different national commission. I was vice president of a national digital council in France during 3 years. I'm also involved in the ARCOM, which is the regulator of media on algorithms also, and disinformation issues. And I'm also at the committee of Cap Digital, in which we have addressed different issues. And as Nicolas said, one big strategy of Cap Digital is to help to make also research production or empirical production in order to implement CDR among the members of Cap Digital. So we have made a lot of studies also with the members of Cap Digital, with my doctoral students on CDR.
It's such an important point that you make in the context of whatever CDR is defined as, how you turn that from concept or ideas or guiding principles into pragmatically how you implement it in an organization and understand how that's followed or enforced or whatever that might be. And it's something that's cropped up in previous conversations. Michael Wade, for example, who's collaborated on CDR with me at IMD. It's the thing that we've often talked about. How do you make it real, substantive thing? Now, part of that may be around regulation, and we'll talk a bit about regulations and what you've seen there. I often talk about the need to innovate, kind of so thinking about the consequential impact of the things that organizations do and being able to describe it in positive ways that relate back to the core aspects of CDR. But let's talk a bit about regulation, because of course there is a big you talked about, Christine, the two areas of focus in terms of AI and data and CDR, but of course there is a big link between those at a regulatory level. So talk to me a bit more about what you've found and what you found in the research and talking to organizations as to how they're looking at implementing CDR, but also in the context of finding a pathway through regulations.
Yes, so from a practical point of view, when we discussed CDR and when we read a lot of literature on CDR, we arrived at the conclusion, quite obvious conclusion, that the first step of CDR, the first step of responsibility in digital innovation is just to respect the law, the existing law. So for us, it's the first step of implementation and probably the simplest one, because it's a question of compliance. We will speak about this term. So we in the CDR Europe project, we made a report. This report is on Good in Tech network. I think it can be downloaded also perhaps on the website of a project. And we just summarized the different type of regulation in Europe concerning digital innovations. So there's a gap here. There's a first gap. If you ask any company, any manager in a company about what, according to you, all the regulations on digital innovation, most of companies are going to say to you GDPR in Europe, and it's the only one. We have only just one regulation, which is GDPR, and it's not the case. That's what shows principally our report and our analysis. So we have now in Europe 3 big areas of regulation. We have regulation on the environmental impact of digital innovation. We have regulation on privacy and data issues, and we have regulation on more digital social impact. It's a more recent regulation, and I'm going perhaps to go rapidly into the 3 type of regulation. So concerning the environmental impact of digital, I think it's a very, very key point today, because most of companies don't really work on this topic, and we know that the environmental impact of digital is important. And if we speak about AI, and if we speak about LLM and generative AI, the environmental impact increases a lot. So we need to address this issue. And we have some law. We have, for instance, a directive in 2009 establishing a framework for the setting of eco-design requirements for energy-related products. We have also another directive in 2010 on the indication by labeling and standard product information on the consumption of energy. So you need to provide information about the consumption of energy on digital innovation also. You have also another regulation in 2008 on a community energy efficiency labeling program for office equipment. And you have also in 2009, eco-design requirements for computers and computer servers. So this is the first part of directives concerning energy efficiency. A second law concerns digital waste. It is a law directive also in 2012 called Waste for Electrical and Electronic Equipment. And then you have also a more recent law in 2022 on non-financial reporting called Corporate Sustainability Directive, where you must now put or establish a non-financial reporting also on the environmental impact. So I think that this law, well, we can go into the detail, but the important thing is to discuss after the implementation. But just to remember that in digital innovation, if we want to be responsible, one of the first steps for most of companies, and more specifically small companies, is really to be compliant on environmental impact of digital. The second family
just
of...
just on that, Christine, though, did you find that organisations have got that visibility? I mean, Nicola, you mentioned there were 200 within the group of other organisations. Do they have the visibility of those regulations that you've laid out? Is it clear how people are following them?
I think that concerning the non-financial reporting, most of multinational companies now work on that, and it's a work in progress. However, in CDR Europe, we are interested in SME, and most of SME don't know about this regulation, as well as the other regulation on energy efficiency and digital waste. So I think there is a problem of awareness about this type of law, and it's more general. Even, for instance, today, when you see the success of AI, of LLM, most of companies don't think about environmental impact first. Of course, they speak about innovation. So just to remind that, be careful, because it can be in the future a boomerang in terms of compliance and obligations.
Nicola, you were going to comment?
Yes, I wanted to add that most of the companies are not, let's say, aware of this regulation actually, especially in France, according to what we know about from our research with them, interviews and so on. But let's also say that for the moment there are not actually regulation that really impact on digital responsibility in France. For example, the non-financial reporting will be probably impact in the future, but not for the moment. But there are some other aspects that are indirectly related with regulations. For example, in France, we have the Loi RIN that came out in 2021, November 2021, with that forces some kind of local administrations, for example, agglomerations, to have a strategy on digital responsibility. And that implies also all the purchases, for example, about digital technologies. And in an indirect way, it impacts also companies that are suppliers. So we have seen that even if there are not, for now, laws that directly impact, let's say, the digital responsibility of companies, many local administrations are starting with criteria for purchases, or even they are introducing criteria when for financing programs, for example, when they give money for some programs, for projects, for example, innovation projects, they start introducing criteria. Is the case of, for example, of several regions in France, like Nouvelle-Aquitaine or even Brittany regions, for example, for giving funds, for European funds, but not only. Some also introduce financing, let's say, funds to for projects that go in the direction of the digital responsibility, and the same for big companies. So many start putting attention on these, let's say, environmental aspects. They integrate the digital responsibility more and more in the social responsibility, in the corporate social responsibility, and they start introducing many criteria concerning also the digital responsibility and the environmental impact. So we have interviewed several big groups, for example, La Poste or France Télévisions and so on, and they start putting attention on suppliers and introducing criteria that go in the direction of the digital responsibility. So even if actually, let's say, concretely, most of the companies are not impacted directly by regulation, there's also a, let's say, bottom-up request that come from the market with buyers that can be public administrations and big groups that start introducing these criteria. So there is a double push for starting and for going in this direction.
And I think I've seen that in some of the work I've done in the past, where organizations have had a desire to show more environmental behaviors, if you like, and therefore they've taken a choice to change procurement methods so that they are at least demonstrating some movement in the right direction, a voluntary change, if you like.
Yes.
Rather than the necessity of change. But of course, Christine, I mean, I was in a payment business when GDPR was introduced. So I spent 2 years, I think, with my team trying to ensure that we kind of were absolutely processing data in the right way, because there was a big fine that was very obviously going to be there for anyone who wasn't doing that. So we know regulation is understood in the privacy and security space, I guess. Were the thing? I mean, we talked about environmental. In terms of the research that you did, were there any other patterns that you found interesting from the research into some of the other areas of regulation?
Yes, so I think that GDPR is a good example because most of companies, as you said, change their practices and to become compliant. Perhaps I just want to emphasize on a very recent regulation, which is the DSA, the Digital Services Act. I worked a lot on that. We organized a big international conference in January 2023, and this regulation is effective since I think 2 weeks, the 17th February 2024. So it seems that it concerns mostly what the law calls the VLOP, Very Large Online Platform, because just to remember that this Digital Services Act aims at regulate the big platforms, so social networks, search engines, for instance. And the objective is to struggle against disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, and to have a more trustworthy environment for users. However, this regulation is key for plenty of new companies or startups working in the information environment, because it's a big opportunity for them. It's also a lot of constraints for the platform. And if we look at often when we speak about digital, we say, okay, the big platform, it is a problem. We need to regulate them and etc. It's a regulation on platforms. And they are, European group working on the DSA implementation. And what we see is the change of platform regularly to become compliant with the DSA. So they develop new functionalities for users. They developed also transparency report and etc. etc. It's a process, of course. It's not perfect at all, but it's a process, ongoing process. And I think just that this DSA can be also an example, as well as the GDPR, for companies on how we can become compliant. The problem, and this is what also we found, is the fact that probably, Rob, if you work on GDPR, that every regulation is also a cost. So when you're a big multinational, it's not a problem generally. When you're an SME or when you're a small company, it's a problem. So it's more complex. And I finish by the last big regulation in the future, which is the Artificial Intelligence Act, but most of companies using or developing artificial intelligence system now must look at this regulation. We will organize in Paris, in Bercy, with the French government, a big international conference at the end of October 2024. So this regulation is based on the notion of risk. You have 3 levels of risk, and according to the level of risk of the application of the artificial intelligence systems, the company will have more or less constraints. So we can enter into the details, but that means that some application of artificial intelligence will be for totally impossible in Europe, and other application will have no constraints. And between both cases, most probably application will be of what we call high risk, for instance, for recruitment, for instance, in health sector. And this application will have different obligations, such as transparency, such as also robustness of a system, human guarantee, and etc. etc. And what has been, and we can have perhaps a debate on that, what was discussed recently at the European level, it's of course the generative AI situation and models. And for the moment, they are not really regulated. And it was the debate about do we need to regulate or do we need to innovate? So how to regulate by maintaining innovation? And on generative AI, the choice was made to, for the moment, allowing companies like Mistral, for instance, in France, to innovate.
And I think there's two key things in my head. One, I mean, we started off by talking about is regulation most effective in terms of top down or bottom up, and I guess the answer is you need both, because both will work for different types of organisations. And then, of course, I mean, spot on with your point there, Christine. The challenge of balancing the desire to innovate and use those technologies to do good things, solve good problems that need to be fixed, without hindering it too much. But at the same time, you've got to be conscious of the harms or the negative effects. So it's that balance. How do you strike that balance? Nicola, tell me a bit more about what you've found with organisations in terms of their thoughts on regulation, or because it is a cost, isn't it? To your point earlier, Christine, many organisations will see it as a cost. I'm conscious that there are different opinions in different countries about whether organisations do things proactively or wait for the regulation to be there. What have you found, Nicola, in the conversations with organisations in France?
Well, I think it depends. It depends on the side of the organization. It was said by Christine. For small organization, it can be considered as a cost, but will become an obligation, as we said, because of the regulation, the future regulations, and also the compliancy for customers and for the market. On the other hand, for the big groups, it's like an investment and towards their market and their customers. So to implement actions toward digital responsibilities and policies, internal policies, about that, it's considered like a label, let's say, toward the market, and to show that the company is attentive to environmental sustainability, to good practices in data management and so on. So it depends on the kind of the companies. As said, big groups generally have already implemented actions and have already plans and strategies on digital responsibilities, and this normally not the case of SMEs, at least here in France, according to what we have seen talking with them and interviewing them.
Just add something. I manage with Nicola and other person in Cap Digital an initiative on digital responsibility among the members of Cap Digital. And before doing that, we decided to make a questionnaire to the 1,000 members of Cap Digital. And I ask one question in this questionnaire. Do you think that digital responsibility is consistent with competitiveness? And we were very surprised about the results. More than 80% of the companies, of the members, because there are different type of members, there are public organizations also, answered, of course, we can. It's even an advantage to be responsible, because of course the products will be accepted on the market, and it's an opportunity in terms of market. So I was very surprised about the level of acceptance of this first paradox, which is not a paradox for a company.
No, I think that's really heartening to hear that. Actually, I taught for a few years about why it's important, and that brand reputation and brand or brand damage threat, if you're being seen to not do the right thing from an environmental point of view or protect people's data, I think it's an important thing. But I too am surprised it was so high. That's great to hear.
It can be also because mainly there are tech companies and IT companies that, I mean, in our network, so they are more aware about the topic than other sectors and other kind of companies. So this could explain why they're particularly interested in the subject. But I think it depends not only on the size, but also on the sector.
Yeah, it's a good point. I've got one question around. I mean, we started earlier in the conversation talking about a range of different regulations and law and directives. Did you find in the work that you've done that they are still consistent? That somebody is actually thinking about how, as those technologies and as new regulation emerges, that there is cohesion between those different initiatives, even those that go back to 2009, 11, 13. And I ask that question because it must be really hard from a business's point of view to ensure that they are consistent with everything all the time.
From my point of view, the most important problem comes from the fact that the regulation is only if I could say, a European one.
Yeah.
And so for multinational companies having the same product everywhere in the world, it's very complex on digital innovation to customize European things in order to become compliant. On evolutions of technology, having worked a lot on the DSA, for instance, it's interesting now to see that when the European regulation is implemented or decided, it is decided to integrate some future technologies. For instance, generative AI will be regulated by the AI Act a little bit, but also by the DSA. And we are not in an area where it is so implemented. So I think that there is a new step now in regulation in which the regulators try to think about, does this regulation will apply to future technologies at the point of a knowledge about the future technologies, of course. But I think it's a new manner to think regulation. The problem is more, for me, there is the compliance with the law, but there is a big issue in companies also is to train data scientists, computer scientists, or people building technologies, having in mind they need to anticipate about the negative effect of a technology. And this is not a regulation. It is not corporate digital responsibility. It's just a problem of organization and the manner people are trained to this topic within the company.
Which in itself must be an opportunity, going back to the innovation side, because we must be able to harness things like generative AI to help organizations think about the consequential impact of the things that they're doing. So just as we approach the end of the conversation, I think I'd like to go back to that question of top down, bottom up. We said it's both, but if there was a final thought, just a short thought that you would leave with everyone listening, what would it be? What would of the work that you've done, what would be the big lesson that you would suggest for SMEs across France or Europe in the context of this top down or bottom up regulation decision? What would they do? Nicolas, would you like to offer something first?
Well, as you said, it's both things. We know that many regulations will come to force and will be applied on next year or so. It will become not only, let's say, a market reputation request, but also really a request from regulation side. So it will be useful to comply. It will be necessary to comply with with the digital responsibility principles and laws. And it will be necessary also to train, especially SMEs that maybe do not have resources internally to analyze, to do an audit, to implement strategies. Actions to support them should be implemented in the different countries by different organizations, for example, like incubators or innovation clusters like us, with like coaching programs, training programs for companies, applying to different sectors, so that they can start entering the mentality of changing their habits and their policies, also internal policies towards
Absolutely. And
digital responsibility.
And of course, that's the value of the programme of CDR Europe that helps organisations do that, which is probably the best way to end the conversation. So thank you both for the contribution. It's been brilliant to talk to you both.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.